The late afternoon sun spilled through the glass walls of Victor Hale's modern suburban home in Seattle. It was a Sunday, family lunch day. His son Ethan and daughter-in-law Claire sat across the dining table, laughing softly about something on their phones while the scent of roasted chicken still lingered in the air. Victor poured the last of the coffee from the French press and filled their cups, smiling the way fathers do when they believe everything in their life still has order, purpose, and love. He had spent 38 years traveling the world as an international businessman, contracts in Hong Kong, Dubai, Berlin, Sao Paulo. He'd negotiated million-dollar deals, survived markets that devoured weaker men, and returned home with the quiet pride of someone who believed success could protect him from disappointment. Now, at 67, he was ready to rest. His company shares had been sold, his retirement paperwork filed, and the pension letter from the global trade firm rested neatly in his briefcase. "I wanted you both to know first," Victor said, settling back in his chair. "Next month, I'm officially retiring. My pension will be around $2,800 a month. Not too bad for an old man, right?" Ethan exchanged a quick glance with Claire. It was subtle, one of those unspoken looks between partners who'd already discussed something in private. "That's great news, Dad," Ethan said after a moment. His tone carried a careful politeness Victor didn't quite recognize. Claire set down her fork. "Actually, it's perfect timing," she added, her voice measured, almost rehearsed. "There's something we've been meaning to talk to you about." Victor's smile softened. "Oh, what's that?" "Well," she said, sliding a printed document across the table, "starting next month, we'll need you to contribute for living expenses. Rent, utilities, food, the usual." Victor blanked, unsure he'd heard correctly. "Rent?" "Yes," Claire said, her tone calm, businesslike. "You've been staying here rent-free for a long time. It's only fair you pay your share. We've calculated everything carefully. Comes to about $1,400 a month." The room went quiet. Even the ticking of the wall clock seemed to hesitate. Victor looked at his son, waiting for him to laugh, to say it was a joke. Ethan only shifted in his chair, pretending to adjust his short collar. "Rent?" Victor repeated, his voice even. "Ethan, I bought this house." Claire gave a small, almost pitying smile. "Actually, Dad, the deed is in Ethan's name. You gave it to him 15 years ago, remember? We still appreciate that, but legally, it's ours now." The words landed like cold metal. Victor remembered the day vividly, the proud moment he'd written that cashier's check for $340,000. He'd paid for the entire property in cash, telling himself he wanted his son to start life without debt. "I didn't give it to you," he said slowly. "I put it in your name so you could build credit, not to hand it over." Ethan finally looked up. "Dad, we're not trying to be unfair, but the bills have gotten high. The mortgage, the insurance." "There's no mortgage," Victor interrupted quietly. "I paid for this place outright." Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's not the point. It's just the fair thing to do. You live here, you contribute." Claire leaned forward. "Don't take it personally, Victor. We're just setting some structure. It's better for everyone." Victor stared at them both. His son, the boy he had carried on his shoulders through airports, the young man he'd sent to business school in California, was sitting there letting his wife turn generosity into rent. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He simply nodded once, slowly. "Interesting," he said. "Very interesting indeed." He stood up, the chair scraping softly against the marble floor, and walked upstairs. In his office, the house felt suddenly foreign. The photographs on the shelves, him with Ethan at age 10, family vacations in Florence, New York, Tokyo, looked like relics from another life. He opened the old mahogany drawer and pulled out a cardboard box labeled in neat handwriting. "House Documents, 2010. Inside were the records, the original cashier's check for $340,000, the closing papers, the title transfer. His name as buyer, Ethan's as title holder. And beneath them, his own handwritten note on yellow paper. For Ethan's future, so he can start ahead of where I did. Victor sat on the edge of the bed, holding the check between his fingers. The paper had yellowed slightly, but his signature was still clear, bold. That piece of paper represented nearly everything he had earned over a lifetime. From downstairs, laughter drifted up again, Ethan and Claire laughing about something, as if nothing had just shattered. He closed the box carefully, placed it on his desk, and stared out the window at the twilight settling over the quiet Seattle neighborhood. They hadn't thrown him out. They'd done something worse. They had priced him. And Victor Hale, who had built empires out of negotiations, knew that when people start putting numbers on love, they're already bankrupt. That night, he didn't sleep. The house he had built for his son no longer felt like home. It felt like a ledger, cold, calculated, and balanced against him. But he wasn't broken. He was planning. The next morning, I woke before dawn. The house was quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the faint wind pressing against the windows. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the faint reflection of my face in the mirror. The man looking back at me wasn't the tired retiree my son saw. He was the man who had navigated international markets, negotiated with oil executives in Dubai, and outsmarted competitors who played dirty. Claire and Ethan thought they were dealing with an old man living off pension checks. They had forgotten what kind of man had built the world that gave them comfort. I put on a sweater, went downstairs, and found a printed document lying neatly beside my coffee mug. At the top, in bold, were the words, House Rules and Expectations. Below it, a list. Quiet hours, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. Kitchen access. Claire's slot, 6 a.m. to 8:30 a.m. Victor's slot, 8:30 onward. Shared spaces, living room, TV area, reserved for tenants, Ethan and Claire. I stood there reading the lines twice. The ink was crisp. Claire's kind of crisp. When she appeared, dressed for work, her perfume sharp as citrus, she smiled like a manager checking in on an employee. Just some structure, she said lightly, makes it clearer for everyone.
I folded the paper once and slipped it into my pocket. Clarity is always good, I said. She didn't notice the edge beneath my tone. By 9 o'clock, both of them were gone. I poured a second cup of coffee and walked upstairs to my office. I took out my old leather notebook, the one I used to track trade negotiations overseas. I flipped to a clean page, wrote the date, and began. March 8. House Rules presented by Claire Hale. Kitchen schedule established. Shared spaces restricted. Recorded without objection. No emotion, no commentary, just facts. I wasn't just recording daily life anymore. I was building a case. That afternoon, I left the house and walked 3 blocks to a bank that wasn't mine, not the one Ethan knew I used. The new branch smelled faintly of coffee and printer ink. The young manager greeted me with a smile that didn't know my story yet. I'd like to open a new checking and savings account, I said, and a small safety deposit box. She typed quickly, efficient and polite. Of course, Mr. Hale. Will these accounts be linked to your other bank? No, I said, completely separate. She didn't need to know why. When she asked about the initial deposit, I transferred $92,000 from my main account, the one Ethan knew about. That left just enough there to seem normal if he ever looked. The manager slid a temporary debit card across the desk. Would you like to add any authorized users? No, I said with a smile. No one but me. By the time I left the branch, the account was open, the safe deposit box keys jingling in my pocket. That evening, while Ethan and Claire were still at work, I unlocked the old cardboard box of house documents, photographed every single page, and uploaded them to cloud storage. The originals I placed in the safety deposit box. If anyone went snooping, they'd find the copies, not the real thing. 2 days later, I came downstairs to find Claire photographing the inside of the refrigerator with her phone. "Documentation purposes," she said when I raised an eyebrow. "For what?" She smiled. "Just tracking usage. Makes it easier to split grocery costs." I said nothing, just wrote it down in my notebook later. March 10. Claire photographed refrigerator. Implied tracking of consumption. Psychological pressure method. Financial accountability narrative. A businessman recognizes accounting language when he hears it. They weren't asking for rent. They were trying to control me. But they didn't know they were teaching me their patterns. That weekend, I invited my neighbor, Patricia Warren, over for coffee. She had lived across the street since I bought the house 15 years ago. A retired teacher, smart and observant. She sat at the kitchen island, looking concerned. "Victor, are things all right? I haven't seen you out in the yard lately." I smiled faintly. "Everything's fine, Patricia. I just needed to ask, do you remember when I bought this house?" Her expression softened. "Of course I do. You were so proud, walking around with the contractor showing off the hardwood floors. You told me you'd paid cash, no mortgage. Everyone in the neighborhood knew it was your house." "Would you be willing to put that in writing?" I asked. She hesitated for just a second, then nodded. "After everything you've done for this neighborhood, I'd be honored to." She wrote a statement that morning, signed and dated it. I scanned it and sent a copy to my email. One witness down. That night, I began my research. I typed into Google, "property bought in another person's name, ownership rights USA." Dozens of results, legal articles, forums, cases, and one phrase that kept repeating, constructive trust. In plain terms, it meant that when one person pays for property but puts it in another's name, the court can declare that the payer is the real owner if there's proof of intent. It was exactly my situation. I bookmarked Oregon Revised Statute Section 95.230, took screenshots, wrote down the statute number, found the names of local attorneys who specialized in constructive trust litigation. One name caught my eye. James Monroe, attorney at law, property and equity disputes. His website said he had 25 years of experience and a background in corporate law, the kind of lawyer who understood money, contracts, and the trail. I wrote his name in my notebook, underlined it twice. Tomorrow, I would make an appointment. The next morning, Ethan knocked on my door just as I was putting on my jacket. "Dad, can we talk?" I turned. His expression was uneasy. "Sure," I said. He hesitated. "About the rent. Claire thinks maybe you should pay the first month in advance, to make things smoother." I almost smiled. "Of course she does." "So, April 1st?" he asked. "April 1st," I said calmly. "Perfect date for it." He blinked, confused by my tone, but I was already halfway down the stairs. James Monroe's office sat on the 12th floor of a glass tower downtown. I'd spent years in offices like that, same sterile smell of coffee and ambition. He met me himself, mid-50s, calm eyes, gray at the temples. His handshake was firm, measured. "So, Mr. Hale," he said, "tell me what's going on." I laid the documents on his desk, one by one, the check, the closing statement, the title transfer, Patricia's witness letter. He reviewed them slowly, methodically. "You funded the entire purchase?" "Yes, every dollar." He looked up. "And they're charging you rent now?" I nodded once. He leaned back in his chair. "Then they've made a serious mistake. What they've done is both immoral and potentially illegal." He tapped a pen against the check. "You can claim ownership under a constructive trust. The courts are clear. If someone pays for a property, but it's titled under another's name, the payer is the rightful owner unless it was a gift." "Was it a gift?" I met his eyes. "Not a gift. It was an investment in my son's future." James smiled faintly. "Then you have a strong case, very strong." He explained the process: filing the petition, gathering evidence, serving them papers. Cost: a $7,000 retainer, maybe 20 total by the end. "How soon can we begin?" I asked. "Tomorrow morning," he said. "We'll need copies of all financial records and any communications that prove you lived there without being treated as a tenant." I wrote him a check. My hand didn't shake once. That evening, I came home before Ethan and Claire returned. I walked through each room slowly, memorizing the details. The hardwood floor I'd chosen from Brazil. The staircase I'd redesigned when Claire wanted more open light. The kitchen I remodeled last summer. All mine. Paid for, maintained, loved. Soon, the law would know that too. When they came home, Claire mentioned something about updating the rent agreement. Her tone was casual. "Of course," I said. "Put it in writing. I prefer paper trails." She smiled faintly, thinking she'd won. But she didn't realize that by the time she printed that paper, I'd already hired a lawyer who knew exactly how to dismantle their empire of entitlement. The tables had turned, quietly, precisely, elegantly. Justice wasn't going to knock on their door. It was going to serve them.
The morning after I hired James Monroe, the sky over Seattle was gray and heavy, like a lid pressed over the city. I didn't mind. Gray skies made people underestimate what was brewing underneath. I woke early, made coffee, and sat by the window as the first rain streaked down the glass. My thoughts were quiet, but sharp, the kind of clarity that comes when you stop caring about how people see you and start caring about what's right. At 9:15 a.m., I dialed James's office. "Monroe Law, good morning," his assistant answered. "Tell James it's Victor Hale," I said. "Mr. Hale, he's expecting your call. One moment." A click. Then James's steady voice. "Good timing. I've drafted your petition. We'll file with the county clerk this afternoon." "How soon will they be served?" "Within 48 hours," he said. "Probably by Thursday. Be prepared for noise." "Noise doesn't bother me," I said. "I figured it wouldn't," he replied, and I could hear the faint smile in his voice. That afternoon, I sat at my desk, the rain soft against the windows. I opened my leather notebook and wrote, "March 14, petition filed, defendants to be served within 48 hours. Below that, I added one more line. "They believe they control the narrative. That's about to change." I closed the notebook and felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Calm purpose. On Thursday, the storm broke in more ways than one. I was upstairs when the doorbell rang. Voices echoed through the hallway, formal, businesslike. Then Ethan's footsteps pounded up the stairs. He appeared at my door, his face pale, papers crumpled in his hands. Claire hovered behind him, red-faced with anger. "What is this?" Ethan demanded. I looked up from my chair. "Legal documents, I'd assume." "You sued us?" Claire's voice cracked. "You actually filed a lawsuit?" "I filed a petition for a constructive trust, yes." Ethan's hands trembled slightly. "You can't do that, Dad. The house is in my name." "Then you have nothing to worry about," I said quietly, turning a page in my notebook. Claire took a step forward. "You're unbelievable. After everything we've done for you?" "For me," I cut her off, my voice low but steady. "Charging me rent in a house I bought isn't something you did for me." They stood there in silence, the sound of the rain filling the space between us. Ethan finally muttered, "You'll regret this." "No," I said, "you will." They left, slamming the door behind them. I heard them downstairs, their voices rising in panic. Drawers opening, paper shuffling, the sound of people trying to figure out how deep their mistake ran. I opened my notebook again and wrote, "March 16, defendants served, immediate anger and denial, psychological pressure effective." Then I poured myself another cup of coffee and let the storm outside do the rest. Over the next few days, the house changed. Not in structure, in atmosphere. They stopped speaking to me except through brief, clipped sentences. Claire started locking the kitchen cabinets. Ethan changed the Wi-Fi password. They were tightening control, mistaking pettiness for power. It didn't matter. I'd already moved my digital life to a separate system. My finances, emails, and files were secure. They could lock the kitchen if they wanted. They couldn't lock out the law. A week later, James called. "We've got a preliminary hearing in 10 days. The judge wants to see both parties." "I'll be there," I said. "There's something else," he added. "I looked into property records. Your son took out a home equity line of credit last year, $80,000. I froze. "Against the house?" "Yes. He's already 3 months behind on payments. The banks issued a notice of default. If he doesn't pay within 90 days, they'll start foreclosure." The math clicked instantly. 80,000 borrowed, monthly payments around 2,400, the same as my pension. That's why they wanted the rent. That's why they demanded exactly half. Not greed, desperation. "Send me the documents," I said. "Already in your inbox," James replied. "It's even better for us. It proves motive, financial pressure, exploitation, misrepresentation." "Good," I said. "Let them dig their own hole." That night, Ethan passed me in the hallway. His tone was falsely casual. "Dad, did someone come by earlier? A guy said he was from the county." "Probably a property appraiser," I said. "Appraiser? For what?" "Personal records." He frowned. "You don't need that. Everything's fine with the house." "I know. That's why I like keeping things in order." Claire called from the kitchen. "What kind of appraiser?" I smiled faintly. "The kind who values truth." Their faces told me everything, confusion edged with fear. The next morning, I emailed James the full set of new evidence. The appraisal report showing the house's current market value at $520,000, the foreclosure notice, and screenshots from the county records. Subject line: additional evidence, urgent. In the body, I wrote, "Title holder took $80,000 HLOC in 2024 without consent. Now in default. Facing foreclosure within 90 days. Rent demands aligned with payment amount. Explains motive, strengthens claim. Proceed accordingly." Then I hit send. By 8 a.m., James called back. His tone carried quiet excitement. "Victor, this is perfect. The foreclosure changes everything. They've proven your point for you, financial exploitation. We'll include this in the hearing, and given the circumstances." He paused. "What?" I asked. "Be cautious. People under financial strain can be unpredictable. If they try to intimidate you, don't engage. Document everything." "I've been documenting since day one," I said. "I figured you had," he said, and hung up.
2 days later, I came home from a walk to find a new lock on the front door. My key didn't fit. I tried the back door. Same thing. Replaced hardware, brass instead of the old chrome. I pressed the doorbell. A faint beep came from a new video camera above the frame. Claire's voice crackled through the intercom. "We're not letting you in, Victor." I stood there in the drizzle. "You're changing locks on a legal resident?" "You sued us," she said coldly. "You abandoned the family. You don't live here anymore." "That's not how the law works," I said. "Too bad," she snapped. "Good luck finding somewhere else to stay." The intercom clicked off. I took out my phone, photographed every angle. The new lock, the camera, the front porch, time-stamped. Then I recorded a short video, my voice calm and even. March 24, illegal lockout by Ethan and Claire Hale. Confirmed video evidence. New locks installed without notice. I called James immediately. "They did what?" he asked, his voice darkening. "They've locked me out, changed everything." "That's perfect," he said. "Terrible for you personally, perfect for the case. Judges hate illegal evictions.
Get a motel, keep every receipt. I'll file an emergency injunction tomorrow morning. That night, I checked into a small roadside motel off Highway 99. The room smelled faintly of detergent and old carpet. The fluorescent light flickered overhead, but it was quiet. I sat on the edge of the bed, looking at the thin curtains fluttering against the window. Everything I owned was locked inside the house I'd bought, the home I built for my son. For about 30 seconds, I felt the weight of it. Age, betrayal, loneliness. Then I straightened, pulled out my notebook, and wrote, March 24, lockout completed, photos and video captured, emergency motion scheduled, lodging expense $69 per night. Below it, I added, emotional cost, none, only fuel. The next Monday, we were back in court. James stood beside me, calm as a stone. Ethan and Claire sat at the opposite table with a discount attorney who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. The judge, a woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, reviewed the emergency motion. Mr. Monroe, she said, your client alleges an unlawful lockout. Yes, Your Honor, James replied, sliding photos onto the desk. Defendants changed locks while my client was away at a medical appointment. No notice, no legal eviction filed. The judge examined the photos, the timestamps, the motel receipts. She looked up. Counsel, she said to Ethan's lawyer, is any of this disputed? The man stammered. Your Honor, this is a family matter. Family or not, the judge interrupted. Residential lockouts are illegal in the state of Washington. Defendants will restore access immediately. They will also reimburse Mr. Hale for temporary housing. She turned to me. Mr. Hale, you'll have supervised access to collect your belongings today if you wish. Thank you, Your Honor, I said. Ethan stared down at the table. Claire's face was expressionless. When the hearing ended, I walked past them slowly. Neither of them spoke. They didn't have to. I could already see the cracks forming, not just in their marriage, but in their entire illusion of control. That night, back in the motel, I wrote my final entry for the day. March 30. Court-ordered reinstatement. Defendants humiliated publicly. Legal foundation solidified. Then I closed the notebook, leaned back against the thin pillow, and allowed myself a small, silent smile. They thought they'd buried me. They hadn't realized I was the storm they just unleashed. The motel's neon sign buzzed outside my window like an insect that refused to die. I'd spent a week there by then, 7 nights of microwave dinners, instant coffee, and the kind of silence that amplifies every passing truck on the highway. But I wasn't lonely. I was watching their empire crumble, one invoice at a time. Every receipt, every line of motel expenses, every legal fee went neatly into a folder labeled restitution. They would pay for every dime. On Friday evening, a knock rattled the thin door. When I opened it, a process server stood there, raincoat dripping, envelope in hand. Mr. Hale? Yes. He handed me the packet. You've been served. I thanked him. He looked surprised. People rarely thank the messenger of lawsuits. After he left, I sat at the small motel desk and opened the envelope. Defendants Ethan and Claire Hale versus plaintiff Victor Hale. Counterclaim for $48,000 in unpaid rent. I read through the pages slowly, almost amused. Their claim alleged that I'd lived rent-free for 15 years while they paid every expense. Attached was an affidavit from Claire's brother, Robert Coleman, declaring under oath that he had personally witnessed Ethan making monthly mortgage and tax payments. The problem? Robert lived 2 hours away in Tacoma and only visited on holidays. I couldn't help laughing, a short, dry sound that startled even me. I picked up my phone and called James. They filed a counterclaim, I said, $48,000, and a sworn statement from her brother. He chuckled softly. Predictable. Desperate people make desperate paperwork. It's full of holes, I promise you. Can we prove it? Oh, easily, he said. Credit card records, GPS data, employment logs. He couldn't have witnessed anything he claims. Give me a week. Then they've just perjured themselves, I said. Yes, James replied. And that's when the tide stops turning. It starts drowning. 3 days later, we met at his downtown office. The window behind him framed a skyline slick with rain. James slid a printed timeline across the desk, color-coded and meticulous. Here's what we've got, he said. Robert's affidavit lists 6 specific dates when he supposedly watched Ethan pay contractors or deliver checks. On all 6, his phone location was logged in Tacoma. 2 of those days, he was clocked in at his job as a security guard. We have digital proof. I scanned the evidence, impressed. You move fast. I've handled hundreds of these, he said. But your case? This one's cleaner than most. They left fingerprints all over the crime scene. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. Next week is the preliminary discovery hearing. The judge will decide whether their counterclaim holds water. Spoiler alert, it won't. The day of the hearing, I wore a charcoal suit I'd bought just for court. It wasn't expensive, but it fit well. Confidence can be tailored. Ethan and Claire sat at the defendant's table, whispering urgently to their lawyer. He looked even more nervous than they did. The judge entered, same silver-haired woman who had ruled on the lockout. She reviewed the docket and looked up over her glasses. Mr. Monroe, she said, I see the defendants have filed a counterclaim. Yes, Your Honor, a baseless one. We can disprove every statement. He handed over an exhibit binder thicker than a phone book. Location records, employment data, time-stamped emails, all confirming the witness could not have been present. The judge scanned the pages, her frown deepening. She turned toward Ethan's lawyer. Counsel, do you have any explanation for these contradictions? He cleared his throat. Your Honor, perhaps the witness misremembered the dates. Misremembering 6 separate dates, she interrupted, and submitting them under oath? Silence.
The judge closed the binder with a firm thud. Counterclaim dismissed. Plaintiff's costs for this motion will be reimbursed by defendants. Claire exhaled sharply, like air escaping a balloon. Ethan's shoulders sagged. When the gavel hit wood, the sound felt final. Outside the courtroom, James smiled faintly. That's strike 1. 2 more, and they'll beg for settlement. Back at the motel, I received an email from James late that night. Subject, discovery update. We've subpoenaed the bank. Foreclosure is officially filed. The lender will testify the Hell Oak was Ethan's alone. This is checkmate, Victor. I leaned back in the stiff motel chair and let the words sink in. Checkmate. It wasn't revenge for me anymore. It was justice doing what justice does. Slow, methodical, unstoppable. 2 weeks later came the main hearing for the constructive trust case. The courtroom was half full. Reporters sometimes sat in on civil cases like this when there was family drama and property on the line. James opened strong, presenting the original $340,000 cashier's check, the 2010 purchase documents, and Patricia Warrant's notarized statement confirming she'd watched me maintain the property for 15 years. Ethan's attorney tried to object, claiming family gift, but James countered instantly. Your Honor, no gift deed was ever executed. The defendants demanded rent last month. You don't charge rent on a gift. Even the judge smiled slightly. She looked at Ethan. Did you contribute any money to the purchase of this home? Ethan hesitated. Not directly, but yes or no, she said. He swallowed. No. And property taxes over the years? I believe my father handled those. So you contributed nothing financially. He nodded miserably.
The judge sighed, setting her pen down. All right, I'm ordering a forensic financial review before the next hearing. The court will appoint an independent examiner to verify every transaction. James nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. As we left, I passed Ethan and Claire arguing in the hallway. Her words were sharp, his defensive. I didn't catch every sentence, but I heard enough. You said he'd never have proof. I didn't need to hear the rest. Proof was all I had. The following month, James called me early one morning. The forensic accountant finished the report, he said. You might want to sit down for this. I'm already sitting, I replied. Every document you gave me checked out. The examiner confirmed all payments originated from your accounts. No record of any contribution from Ethan. They also caught Claire's brother lying. His work logs place him 70 miles away during those alleged visits. He paused, letting it sink in. The examiner's conclusion is one line long. Ownership of property funded 100% by Victor Hale. I smiled for the first time in weeks. That's our hammer. And we're about to swing it, he said. Final hearing is in 3 days. When we walked into court that Friday, the energy was different. The gallery was fuller, curious faces lining the benches. Word had spread through the courthouse about the father versus son property war. James laid the forensic report on the judge's bench like a verdict carved in stone. Dr. Peterson, the examiner, testified briefly. In my professional opinion, all evidence indicates Mr. Hale provided the purchase funds, performed maintenance, and paid ongoing expenses. There is zero financial record connecting Ethan Hale to ownership. The defense lawyer tried a half-hearted cross-examination, but Peterson dismantled every question with calm precision. Finally, the judge leaned forward. So, doctor, to summarize, you find that the plaintiff is the rightful, equitable owner of the property? Yes, Your Honor, without question. The judge nodded, made notes, and called for a recess. James and I stepped into the hallway. He was grinning like a man who could already see the finish line. They've got nothing left, he said. When we go back in, she'll rule. And when she does, that house is yours again, legally, permanently. The recess lasted 25 minutes. When we returned, the courtroom felt heavy with anticipation. The judge adjusted her glasses and read from her notes. Based on the financial documentation, witness statements, and forensic analysis, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Victor Hale. The property located at 512 West Magnolia Drive is hereby declared held in constructive trust. The defendants must either execute a quitclaim deed transferring title to the plaintiff or pay him the current fair market value of $420,000 plus legal costs. Her gavel came down with a decisive crack. Claire gasped softly. Ethan just stared, his face drained of color. It was over. Outside the courthouse, James clapped my shoulder. Congratulations, Victor. You didn't just win. You set a precedent. Most people cave halfway through something like this. I've spent my life negotiating with sharks, I said. These two were just minnows. He laughed. Fair point. What do you want to do now? I looked up at the overcast sky. Go home. When I returned to Magnolia Drive a week later, a moving truck was parked outside. Ethan and Claire were carrying boxes to the curb. Claire didn't look at me. Ethan finally walked over, eyes hollow. Dad, I'm sorry. I should have stopped all this. I nodded once. You should have. He hesitated. What happens now? You move on, I rebuild. He looked at the house, then at me. You really won. No, I said softly. The truth did. He turned away, loaded the last box, and drove off. The sound of the truck faded down the wet street until there was nothing left but wind in the trees. I stepped onto the porch, the same porch where I'd once handed Ethan the keys 15 years earlier. The air smelt of rain and cedar. Inside, the house was quiet. The floor still shone. The walls still held warmth. But the energy had changed. It was mine again, earned, not given. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee, carried a cup to the back deck, and watched the clouds part just enough for a shaft of sunlight to touch the yard. For the first time in months, the silence wasn't hostile. It was peaceful. Justice hadn't arrived with fury or vengeance. It had arrived like the morning after a long storm, slow, clear, and irreversible. The house was silent again. Not the silence of tension, the kind that had filled these walls for months, but the kind of quiet that follows a storm. Clean, empty, safe. It took me a few days to realize that silence, when earned, sounds like peace. Boxes still sat stacked in the hallway, some labeled in my handwriting from years ago. I unpacked slowly, one memory at a time. The framed photo from my company's Dubai conference, the Italian leather briefcase from my first international deal, the little model jet Ethan had built when he was 9, its wings still glued crooked.
Everything had weight now, not because of what it cost, but because of what it survived. The first morning after they left, I brewed coffee in the kitchen, my kitchen again. Sunlight spilled across the marble countertops, hitting the chrome pot like a reflection of old memories being polished back to life. I took my cup to the back deck and watched the neighborhood wake up. Patricia, my neighbor, waved from her porch. "Welcome home, Victor," she called. "Feels good to hear that," I said. "You earned it," she replied. "We all knew you would." Her words settled in my chest like warmth spreading through cold metal. I'd spent so long proving ownership to a court that I'd almost forgotten what home felt like. That afternoon, I met James Monroe for lunch downtown to finalize the paperwork. He arrived precisely on time as always, carrying a slim folder. "Title transfer confirmed," he said, sliding it across the table. "Your name's officially on the deed again. The bank's lien is cleared. The case is closed." I traced my finger over the embossed seal on the last page. My name, Victor Hale, sole owner. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then I said, "You know, I thought winning would feel louder." James smiled faintly. "Real justice doesn't roar. It just removes the weight that shouldn't have been there." We ate quietly for a while. "Any plans now that it's over?" he asked. "I might finally take that trip I've been postponing for 20 years. I hear the Amalfi Coast hasn't changed much." He chuckled. "You deserve it. Just don't buy any houses in someone else's name while you're there." I laughed for real then, the kind of laugh that shakes off years of fatigue. When we finished, I paid the bill. James tried to protest, but I stopped him. "You fought for me when family didn't. Lunch is the least I can do." Back home that evening, I walked from room to room, flicking lights on and off. Each switch felt like reclaiming territory. The office where I'd once drafted global contracts now held the documents that had saved me: the check, the title, the court orders, the forensic report. I put them in a sleek black binder and labeled it "Case Closed." Then, for the first time since this began, I slept through the night. Weeks passed. The rhythm of normal life returned, though normal had a new meaning now. I mowed my own lawn again. I cooked small dinners, poured good wine, and started jogging in the mornings. I began mentoring a young trade consultant online, someone who reminded me of Ethan before ambition curdled into entitlement. Every morning, I check my email, half expecting some echo of the past. A letter from Ethan, a message from Claire, a legal notice. Nothing came. Until one Friday afternoon in July. A plain white envelope lay in my mailbox, no return address, only my name written in Ethan's handwriting. Inside was a single page. "Dad, I don't expect forgiveness. You were right and I was wrong. I lost sight of what mattered. Claire and I are separated. I'd been offered a job in Colorado. I'm leaving next week. Thank you for not destroying me completely when you could have. I'll try to earn back the man I used to be. Ethan." I read the letter twice, folded it carefully, and set it on my desk.
There was no triumph in me, only quiet relief. Sometimes revenge doesn't end with someone ruined. It ends when they finally face themselves. That night, I stood on the back porch again, coffee in hand, the same way I had on that first night after regaining the house. The sky was deep orange over the trees. The hum of summer crickets filled the air. The property felt alive again, not haunted by greed or bitterness, but by renewal. I thought about everything that had happened, about how love, when turned into leverage, can rot the foundation of even the strongest family, about how generosity, when misunderstood, can become a weapon, and about how truth, quiet, patient, undeniable, will always find its way to the surface. The next morning, I drove to the county clerk's office, not for another legal battle, just to file one final document, the notarized statement transferring the deed from trust to my personal ownership, without condition, without encumbrance. When the clerk stamped the file, I asked her for a copy. She smiled, slid it through the glass. "Everything looks good, Mr. Hale. Congratulations." I nodded. "Thank you. It took a while." "Justice usually does," she said. On my way home, I stopped by Patricia's house with a bouquet of flowers. She laughed when she opened the door. "You didn't have to do that." "You wrote the truth when others didn't," I said. "That deserves flowers." She placed a hand over her heart. "How's it feel, being the rightful owner again?" I thought for a moment. "It feels fair, finally fair." She smiled. "Then don't waste it. Houses remember things, Victor. Make new memories for that one." Her words stayed with me long after I walked away. That weekend, I began renovating. Not major work, just painting, fixing small things, making the house mine again in every corner. In the attic, I found a dusty box marked Ethan, Childhood. Inside were old report cards, a baseball glove, and a faded photo of the two of us at a Mariners game. I stared at it for a while. Then I cleaned the frame and set it on the living room shelf. It didn't hurt to look at anymore. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's closure. And I'd carried enough bitterness to know the difference. By August, the house was fully restored, the lawn trimmed, the windows clear, the rooms bright. The market appraisal James had once shown me, $520,000, was now almost symbolic. I hadn't just won back a property worth $420,000 after deductions. I'd reclaimed something that can't be priced: self-respect. On the anniversary of the court ruling, I invited a few old colleagues for dinner. We laughed, shared stories from overseas, traded old business jokes. At one point, my friend Martin raised a glass. "To Victor," he said, "still standing when the rest of us are slowing down." I smiled. I didn't just stand, I rebuilt. We toasted. The sound of glass meeting glass was sharp and satisfying, like punctuation at the end of a long, hard sentence. Later that night, when everyone had gone and the house was quiet again, I walked through each room once more, turning off lights one by one. In the office, the case closed binder sat on the shelf beside the photo of me and Ethan. I placed a hand on both, past and present, side by side. Then I turned out the light. Outside, the air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain. The neighborhood was calm, streetlights glowing amber in the dusk. I stood at the edge of the porch, feeling the wood beneath my feet, the home beneath my name. It had taken betrayal, months of legal battles, and a mountain of patience to reach this point. But it had been worth it. Because justice isn't about revenge. It's about restoration. Reclaiming what's yours, not through anger, but through proof, perseverance, and truth. I raised my cup of coffee, dark, quiet, unshakable. "To peace," I murmured, "to the kind you earn." The night settled around me like an old friend, and for the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I belonged, at home. If you enjoyed the video, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and press the bell icon next to it. Thank you.